Hi, I'm Tina. Welcome back. Today I want to talk about squats, painful squats, and how to correct them. Recently I've been working with a lot of new clients, women in their 50s and older, who have told me squatting hurts my knees, or they don't squat because they have pain. And while we don't want to have pain during exercise, we can't avoid squats, or I believe you should not avoid squats because it's a fundamental movement that you'll need with you your entire lives. So you might not think about it now, but when you're in your 70s or 80s, you don't want to have to hold on to a railing just to sit down onto the toilet. You want to have strong enough legs where you can do that independently, or even to bend down to do gardening or pick up your groceries. It's an important life exercise. So what I'm finding when I work with these clients is it's the way that they're squatting that's hurting their knees. So I'm going to show you the most common, errors that I'm seeing that creates the pain and how you can assess and correct them for yourself. Let's get started. So let's talk about error number one. I'm seeing this for people who have knee pain. They're squatting like this. So can you see how narrow my feet are? And I'll turn to the side. It's very narrow, so it's actually very hard to balance when it's so narrow. Too narrow means more narrow than your hip distance. So that's error number one, too narrow. So you can always look in the mirror to see if you're going too narrow. Form error number two. Same narrow point, but toes are pointing directly forward. Somewhere in the vast media, people have this assumption that you're supposed to have your toes directly pointing forward. But as you can see, it's really hard to balance when your toes are going straight forward. You don't want your toes going straight forward. It puts a lot of pressure here on your knees. So that's number two that I commonly see. Number three common error that creates knee pain. If you're going down, maybe you're not too narrow, but if you're bending at your knees to come down, like this, that is putting so much pressure into your knee and your kneecap. When you bend down, when you think, oh, I'm squatting, so I'm just bending my knees, basically you're shifting all your body weight into your knees, and that's a lot of strain. That will also create knee pain. So, how do we correct these three things, even if you're not doing all three, but just even one of them? These are the following tips I have. Number one, I want you to widen your stance. So instead of having your feet right underneath or shorter than your hips, I want you to widen your stance. So it'll be a little different for everyone. For me, I go right around here, right? So you can see where my feet are, right outside my hips, so that when I squat, I've got more of a base of support. So think of that. You don't want it too narrow because you want to widen your base of support. And let me show you from the side. This is my squat distance. And when you want to figure out what your squat distance is, you're going to kind of experiment. So for me, it's here. For some of my clients, I have them widen it up a little. Because what you want is when you have this stance, you want all this stuff to get out of the way. Because when you're super narrow, your belly goes into your thighs and it's hard to balance. So you want to widen your stance up. So as I said, for me it's here, but for you it could be even a little wider. You're going to experiment. So widen up your stance, come on down. Do you feel more stable and balanced? You want to make sure you're stable and balanced with your feet totally flat on the ground. So my heels are not going to come up, because if I have my heels come up, I'm not going to be stable and balanced. So number one is widen up your stance. Hip distance a little bit wider than hips. Everyone's a little different. Wider's okay. Narrow does not give you much stability. So that's number one. Now that we've talked about stance, let's talk about toes. So one of the errors that people make is pointing their toes directly forward. As you can see, even in a little doll that's in it, you need to have the toes turned out. So once you find your stance width, turn your toes out a little bit. It also creates more stability because everything is about being stable. So if I'm here, but if I have my toes pointed straight forward, you can see my knees are gonna be doing something really wonky. So if I found my squat stance, I'm gonna turn my toes out a little so that when I come down, I've got plenty of room to come down. Tip number 3. So you got the wide stance, your toes are turned out, and if you still put a lot of pressure into your knees or bend at your knees, you're going to have knee pain. So the next thing I want you to think about, the cue, is even though my feet are not moving, they're planted, I'm going to try to imagine that I'm screwing my feet outward. So as I come down, I'm going to screw my knees outward. Screw my feet outward, and that pushes everything away, and it engages when I screw my feet outward. See, feet are not moving, but I'm trying to screw it outward. Then I can see that my muscles behind me are actually working and supporting me as I go down. You want these muscles to work, because again, the knee's not doing all the work. Everything should be working together to help you come down into the bottom of a squat. That's number 3. Screw the feet outward. And the last cue, I know it seems like a lot, but you just have to remember, wide stance, toes pointed out, screw the feet outward, and then the last one is when you're coming up or even going down, sit into your heels. So for anyone who's gone to sit down on a public toilet, there's no way in hell you would just plop yourself out on the toilet with your knees like that. You would stick your butt out behind you, kind of be sitting in your heels to find your balance to hover over the toilet. So as you're screwing your feet outward, I want you to sit into your heels when you go down and press into your heels when you come up from your squat. So remember, a lot of it's more weighted into your heels. I think those are the 4 tips, the 4 key ones that I find that most people are not doing when they have knee pain. And I hope these tips will help you get rid of any knee pain you have during squatting, because we all must be squatting. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel down below. I'll see you next time.